I'm your host and the producer of Stageworthy, Phil Rickaby. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. If you're watching on YouTube, it would be great if you could hit the like and subscribe button, hit the little bell to get alerts and all that sort of stuff. The things that YouTubers always say. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of the other places where you get podcasts, I would love it if you would subscribe if you haven't already. That way, every episode will be delivered right to you and you will never miss an episode of Stageworthy. And believe me, I have a lot of exciting things planned for the future of this podcast. Today, my guest is Mariel K. Hunter. I first met Mariel a couple of years ago, well, pre-pandemic years ago. So I guess more than a couple. I was in St. John, New Brunswick for the Fundy Fringe, and Mariel was there getting ready to take her show to the Halifax Fringe, and I was going there. So we got to meet there and then did the Halifax Fringe and became really good friends. At the time that I met Mariel, she being a St. John native, but was living in Vancouver, having gone there for theater school and then stayed there for a number of years and is now back in St. John. They're teaching and also doing some casting locally. Mariel is an incredible performer and director, extremely insightful as a director and show creator. Mariel is one of those directors who could just sort of like see into the heart of a scene and drop that little tidbit of knowledge that the performer needs to make it come to life. And I won't keep you any longer because here's my conversation with Mariel Hunter. So, Mariel, I want to start just jumping in. I would like to start by talking about your cross-country journey that you've had.
Transition.
Yeah. I mean, so first off, you had, you were, when I met you, you were living in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're back in St. John, which is where you grew up. So what was the journey that took you from okay, first off, from St. John to Vancouver, then from Vancouver to St. John?
Yeah, let's cover both leaps. So when I was a kid growing up in St. John, I knew I wanted to be an actor. I knew I wanted to be involved in film and television and theater. And I grew up in that age where when you tried to go online, it still made those really funny sounds. Do, 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 do.
Oh, I know those sounds. Yeah.
We'll have to explain it to your younger audience. But I remember sitting at my ancient computer and dialing up to the internet and looking for, how do I get an agent? How do I get into a movie? How do I go on TV? All of these things. And it was like, you go to Toronto or you go to LA or you go to New York. There was nothing on the East Coast at my age to go and do. And so I knew that at some point I was probably going to have to make a leap somewhere. Life comes at you. You end up in school. I went to do a little bit of university. And I was about, I have like a semester left of my university degree to this day, because I got to the point of like, if I don't go and do something about this dream I have now, I'm never going to do it. And
I have to interrupt you because one of the things that I'm always curious about is for people who came to the realization that this is what they wanted to do. What was it that you were doing at the time that you were like, I can't do this anymore?
So I was doing a double major arts degree in poli-sci and philosophy with a minor in business. And I was, in a relationship that wasn't going terribly well. And I had this dream one night that, I ended up married and in St. John and, 2.5 kids and whatnot. And I had this little girl in the dream who ran up to me who looked just like me. And she said, Mommy, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I said, I wanted to be an actor. She was like, why aren't you? And I was like, oh, gut shot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so it was just this reality check of like, someday I wanted the family and I wanted to be able to say you can go and do whatever you want to do. But you have to go and you have to try. And so that kind of was a call to action for me to go and to try. And I have literally no regrets. I would have regretted it forever had I not gone. And I always knew that ending up back here would be a part of that journey. I actually wrote in my journal the day that I left St. John in earnest. So I went out to Vancouver in 2012 to do a year of school. And in January 2013, I got on a plane to all right, here we go, career time. And I wrote in my journal as the plane took off in St. John, you've got 10 years. You've got 10 years to get everything you want out of this. Meet all the people you want to meet, work all the work you want to work, do all the things that you got to do that aren't here in this region, because somebody's going to need you to come back. And Phil, I swear to God, my dad called me up in January of 2023 and said to me, hey, I've got a surgery coming up. I really need you to come home, spend a few days here, help me out. Can you do it? I said, yeah. I just picked a day out of the thin air, and I got on the plane. I was checking my Facebook memories, and it was 10 years to the day since I had left St. John, New Brunswick.
No.
Seriously, 10 years to the
Wow.
day. And I just kind of sat there flabbergasted. And I was with my lovely husband, who was at the time my fiance. And he came a few days after me. And we were staying in my parents' basement, helping them out for a few days. And we looked at each other and we were like, yep, it's time to make the leap back, you know? And I really feel like I got what I wanted out of Vancouver. I made incredible friends in all of these industries, and had incredible experiences. And it's just time for the next chapter.
Yeah. So you kind of skirted around the you said that when you were a kid, you wanted to be in television, that sort of thing. When do you remember when it occurred to you that this was a thing that somebody could do?
Oh my gosh. I think I played Barbie in my kindergarten Christmas play, and Santa and I got to save Christmas. And I think that from that moment on, there was nothing that was going to stop me. I've since found, I'm an adopted kid. And so I found a book from my foster family that was given to my adoptive parents about, what I was like in their care. And I only found this when I moved back here in the last couple of years. And it said, Mariel's quite the entertainer. She mimics anybody she can mimic. She puts on a show for anyone who's willing to watch, I have pictures of myself setting up all my toys and performing to them in my living room as a kid. I think it's just, something I was born with to a certain degree of I gotta entertain somebody doing something.
I think that there's, because I in my years doing Stageworthy, I've talked to a lot of people, and some people have a very distinct memory of this is the moment when I saw this play. I was like, I want to do that. That's the thing. And some other people, like yourself, just sort of started entertaining.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They for me, I don't remember a moment. I just remember gathering the kids together when a bunch of people were over, and I was like, all right, we're putting on a play.
Yes, I did the same. Poor cousins, my brother. Oh my God. I remember the rehearsals over while everybody was cleaning up Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you spent some time in 10 years in Vancouver. Now, as somebody who grew up in, there's two culture shocks that I kind of want to discuss.
Yeah.
You grew up in St. John, and then you went to Vancouver, which is very different than St. John.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about what that was like. But then your husband came back to St. John with you, having, I think, grown up in Vancouver.
He grew up in Toronto, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a Thornhill boy. Yeah.
Okay. That's not really Toronto, but that's.
You're gonna have to cut that part out for him, for him.
Yeah. I'll cut that out. But for him, it must have also been a bit of a culture shock going to St. John, which again is a very different place than Toronto or Vancouver. So what were those culture shocks like, both like for yourself, but also like culturally for the theater scene?
Yeah, it's funny because I was just discussing this the other night. Going out to Vancouver from St. John, it was this whole different world in so many ways. Obviously, like a huge city compared to my hometown. Um, lots of nuance. I know you saw my Fringe show a million years ago, where I kind of do that walkthrough as a culture shocked person new to the big city. And that's truly what it was like. I woke up in my apartment. I had gotten there in the dark of night the night before I had my first like day of school, and I had to walk through East Hastings to get to our campus. And right away, yeah, that was a culture shock. That was something, and difficult, I think, to see and to process, and very much became a part of artistic things that I wanted to stage in the future. I wanted to bring things like that into my work that people wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to in other places, and bring my St. John life into my Vancouver work in a similar way. And so, yeah, landing there and finally getting to be a part of things, I think was just terrific. Because from coming from St. John at that time, St. John had at one point kind of, I think just before I was really old enough to be involved, had some film sort of stuff going on. It's always had a local theater company, like community theater, and a provincial theater company. But that was really it. And I found some of those things really hard to get into. It was kind of like an established, you know, thing that, there wasn't that much going on. There were a few shows a year and not many roles for an 11-year-old. And going out west, it was just like, oh my God, I can go take a dance class on a Tuesday afternoon. I can go and I can get singing lessons or join any type of choir that possibly exists, or I can book a rehearsal studio somewhere and go roll around on a floor for no reason with other people who feel completely fine rolling around on floors with strangers for no reason. And I think that was just like a really incredible thing to experience. Uh, and it's just such a community of artists everywhere you go. You get on the bus, and I always make the joke, there's 20 people on the same bus with the same sides going to the same audition. And we're different auditions, and it's not anything like you would see where I'm from. Certainly not in the time I was from here. And so huge culture shock, absolutely, but so, so wonderful. And then in the shift back to St. John, New Brunswick, I mean, yeah, absolutely a culture shock all over again, and definitely one for my husband, who has always been a big city boy. And it's been incredible in so many ways. I started my theater company here in May of last year, so we're just going on our first full year. Yay! And I planned out like a full month long social media campaign to launch my first like free workshop. Here I am, here's Fort Hart, like come out and give us a chance, check us out. And it was like this day-long free workshop, lunch provided. And I really thought it was going to be an uphill battle to get anybody to come out. I had 20 spots. And I was like, if somehow I get enough people, maybe I can throw another one or whatever. And by the end of the first week, I had filled the workshop and I had 40 people on a wait list. So I was thrilled with that. That was amazing. And so there's definitely a demand here. That said, it's difficult to get people into the flow of things. So I run mostly monthly workshops, and obviously that's a big commitment for a lot of folks. So we're also doing things like actor workouts once a month, and we're trying to launch youth workshops once a month for people aged like 14 to 18, which has become really important to me because that's, little Mariel wanted this to exist back then and didn't really have that opportunity. And how I would have loved to have just been able to work with somebody who had some industry experience and could, tell me where to go and what to do. Because I really didn't have anywhere I felt I could find that guidance.
It's really hard to find that when you are young, especially if you are a Canadian performer. Because if you look up, how to break into the movie or whatever it is that kids might search for, it's going to show you stuff largely about going to the States, going to Los Angeles, and going to New York, that sort of thing. And so it can be hard to find that information and actually to get it from people who've lived that, which is so valuable. It's so valuable to be able to just sort of talk to somebody who's done or is doing the thing that you want to do.
Yeah, hugely. And I think that we need more of that here in New Brunswick. A big dream of mine is bringing in some people that I've had the good fortune to meet, whether that's online or otherwise in person, to hopefully host some workshops down the road, and they can come and work with some of the more advanced troupe that I'm working with, and those people can get a bit more coaching from industry professionals who, you turn on your TV and you see them. And wouldn't that be great? Just to feel that sense of, I don't want to say legitimacy, because an actor's an actor's an actor's, my perspective. The lucky ones are the ones on our TV and in our films. But it does give that sense of like, okay, this person like has a trajectory that I want to follow. And to be able to have the opportunity to speak to somebody like that, I think means the world to so many.
It's also so valuable to be able to just get the stories from someone who's done it, like when I was in theater school, I went to George Brown, and all of our faculty were full-time performers. So except for two, we had two full-timers, and everybody else would come in and teach us stuff, and they would have the best stories. We had a music teacher, I think he's passed on, but when he was not feeling well, he would just sit there and we're not going to sing today, and he'd just tell us stories. And and just to date myself for when this happened, he would sit there with a cigarette going in an ashtray as he told the stories, because you could do that in those days.
Back in the good old days, right?
I don't know if they're good, but yeah.
I had some great teachers along the way who I really, really adore. I've been lucky enough to study a number of times with Matthew Lillard. One of my dearest friends and mentors is Bill Marchant. And the entire staff at Vancouver Film School, where I went, at the time I went there, were all working actors. And so, we'd frequently have classes rescheduled because people were on set that day. And what a wonderful thing that was, because then they were bringing that knowledge back to us.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always great when some performers not only have great stories, but because they're performers, they tell them really well.
Yeah. There is a certain level
that always
of
helps too.
Entertainment value.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned your theater company. You mentioned your company, Fort Hart, and I am curious because that's your theater company there, but it was also your theater company in Vancouver. That's the company that you performed your Fringe show under. What was the impetus for creating that company? And please tell me the story about choosing the name.
Oh, great. Yeah, I will. The impetus for creating the theater company was I was out in Vancouver. I was doing the thing. I was living the dream, struggling to get into auditions despite having to work that day, and just all the things that we go through as starving wannabes. And I started looking at some of my friends who were also going to all these auditions, and they were really talented people, incredibly talented people, people who I have enormous respect for. And it's the Canadian curse, it's Hollywood North. You're going to get a day play role, and that's kind of where it lives, And so they were going out for girl number 2 or person in toilet paper commercial. And at some point I realized that I was killing myself even to be at that level. And it was just like, this is not what, little Mariel dreamed of doing. I wanted to tell stories, and I just felt this calling to the stage. And so I had I had some inspiration from a couple of teachers of mine. And I just felt like, you know what? I've got to make something happen for myself. It's me or it's no one, And so I decided I would put on shows. And I think my goal was like, I wanted to do 20 shows in a year, which is insane. But, they say shoot for the moon.
That is not just shooting for the moon. That is like, that's shooting for like Saturn or something, because that is a lot of shows.
It's a lot of shows. I think it came from a story Matt Lord told me where he said he went to Circle Square, and they said that they did like 24 shows in like a year or a couple of years. I don't know what it was. It was very impressive though, and it was a launch point for me.
I just want to stop and say that's great for them, because they have resources, probably more than one stage. That's stuff they can do.
Yeah. Well, I didn't take that into consideration the way I probably should have. But I will say that like we launched in 2017, and by the time the pandemic rolled around, we had done about 20 shows. So
that's pretty good.
It wasn't bad.
Pretty good.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I was pretty proud of it. And they were stories I wanted to tell. They were projects I was really excited about. Every single one of them I look back and I'm proud of, And so it's just something that like really made me feel empowered in my own career, in a career where so much of it is in other people's hands for reasons you will never know or understand. It's amazing to hold some of that responsibility yourself and say, I wanted to do this and I did it.
It's one of the hardest things about the industry, I think, that certainly young actors going into the industry don't know, because nobody really gets across to them. And I don't even know, when I was at theater school, maybe somebody said it, but I was young and stupid, so I didn't hear it. But like that, if you don't get a role, you are never going to know why.
Yep, ever.
You are never going to know what it was. And it could be the shirt you were wearing didn't go with the shirt with the person they already had in mind for the role had been wearing that day. Yeah. You don't know. No. And so it takes a lot of fortitude to be able to go into the industry and just let things go.
Yeah. I always use the example with my students. I always say, you're never going to know why. And it could be that you look like their ex-girlfriend, or, you look like that guy that pissed them off on the subway on the way in today, You're never going to know. And so it's not your job. The other thing I always share with them is there's a brilliant Bryan Cranston quote. He was interviewed backstage at the Oscars years ago. And I can't remember what the question is, but it's something about like, what advice would you give to younger actors? And it's like, know what your job is. And your job is not to go to the audition to book the role. Your job is to go to the audition and show them what you do, and put together the most well-rounded version of the character that you can, deliver that, leave it there, walk out and go do the next thing.
Yeah.
That's your job.
Yeah. It's so hard to keep that in perspective, though. And I don't think a lot of people do manage that, because once you start doing a lot of auditions, it's like, it feels like that's the grind, the audition to get the role, the audition to get the role. Yeah. And sometimes it's so hard to keep that fact in your mind, because you're just thinking about this audition and then that next audition, rather than like, what do I bring to this role?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's about making the role your own, right? Like if it's something I say often in our workshops, is just like, there's never going to be another version of your, I don't know, Stanley, there's never going to be another version of your Blanche. It's you and what you bring to it. And your Blanche today is going to be different than your Blanche is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's going to depend on so many factors that you can't even quantify. The important key part of your job in this audition, in this performance, and whatever it is you're doing, is to be there presently and authentically, and to know your lines and get the job done.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
by connecting with the other person and working.
Well, as best as you can, because sometimes it's hard to, I mean, if it's a film audition, it can be really hard to connect with that casting director who's just reading in a monotone, but you have to fake it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. For me, I think I can land in connection pretty solidly and quickly with my readers. I just, I'm always kind of aware of like, I don't know if you're coming with me or not, but I'm going. Like, you've been invited to this journey, and here we go. Good luck.
Sometimes that's what you got to do, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like you hear these stories of an actor who's been like, a casting director sees something in them and they're not right for this role, but they're like, I know. But then you also hear like stories about somebody who walks in, they're auditioning for this show, they're not right for that role, but suddenly they're like, I like this actor, we're going to create a thing for them.
Yep.
Like one of my favorite stories, the character on Cheers, Cliff Clavin, that didn't exist until that actor walked in. He was auditioning for Norm, and they were like, we've already cast him, so we've already got our barfly. and he said, but do you have a bar know-it-all? And they said, a what? And he said, well, there's a long tradition. He launched into this long thing, very Cliff Clavin, describing the history of the bar know-it-all. And they were like, well, we have to hire this guy.
I love that he knew it all to the extent that he knew he needed a role on the show, and he convinced them of that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I love stories like that. And I think it's true. I think you do. I think when you make the choice to take responsibility for your own trajectory and take your career in your own hands, like he shot his shot, and he certainly got what he wanted out of it.
Listen, I think sometimes I think you can shoot your shot too far, right? You can like go so far with shooting your shot that they're like, I need this person out of this room. So you have to be able to like judge what your shot is and like feel what that's going to be. But the worst they can say is no. And it's 2 letters, and it's not the end of the world. And tomorrow you go to another audition. The worst they can say is no. And that's, as long as you can keep that in mind, that's not the end of the world, you can keep going.
Yeah. And I think it's just that, there's going to be another audition. There's going to be another role. And if there isn't, go make one. Jason Segel, I've been kind of obsessed with lately. Love him, first off. And secondly, talk about creating your own opportunities. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and there's a great interview where he talks about have you seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall? It's relevant to the story. No. It's not my type of film. It's totally a dude comedy. That said, moments of absolute brilliance, yes. And so he sings in the film a really weird song from a vampire musical that his character has written.
Right. Isn't it a vampire puppet musical?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And the story behind that is that he actually wrote that musical. And he went over to Judd Apatow's house one night because he wasn't getting any roles. He was this tall, awkward, lanky, kind of goofy-looking guy. And he went over to his buddy Judd's place, who was like his industry friend at the time. And he played it for him. And he's like, this is it, man. This is it. And Judd was like, lovingly, you can never show anyone this. Like, you can never bring this stuff. Like, don't do it, man. And then when they, kind of made it a bit down the road and they did Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Jason was like, oh, I know how the film ends. Vampire puppet musical. And Joe was like, right. It's your film, man. Like, more power to you. And it worked out beautifully. It was amazing. There's a great video of the table read where he plays the song in the table read and the room lights up. And I just think it's such a great example of creating from what might not have been a great idea or concept something that comes to life later down the road. I always say, whatever you do as an artist is going to serve you somewhere someday. And so
That's true.
maybe that audition choice doesn't work for this character. The casting director hates it, whatever. But then you go to another audition, they give you a redirect, and somehow that choice becomes something brilliant that
Yeah.
the next casting director is like, oh my God, that is so this character. And the only reason you were able to go there is because you've gone there before.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I just think it, for me, evolves into this thing of like, try the thing, do the thing, make the choice, go for it, and see where it lands. Because that's out of your hands. What other people think about it is out of your hands.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think a lot of times we worry a lot about getting it right. I remember back when I was in theater school, our acting teacher would often say, "There's no right and there's no wrong." And then occasionally, when we were getting ready to do something, he'd be like, "Get it right," and we'd be like, "Which is it?"
That's the most theater school story I've ever heard.
Which is it? Like we're like spinning around, but
Yeah.
also now I'm like, you just have to make the choice. Like you got to fail.
Yes.
You know. And sometimes it feels like you can't, especially in the theater. Like a reviewer is coming to see the show.
Oh,
and if
yeah.
they hate it, they're
Mhm.
gonna that is going to exist forever. My first play got one of the worst reviews I've ever gotten, with the line that haunts me to this day. The phrase was uttered that the play has the impact of a feather duster.
Ooh. Oh, Phil.
No, but like, listen, they were not wrong about that play. But again, you have to fail and understand it's not the end of the world.
No, I know. And like, you also have to understand that one night or one scene or one whatever doesn't define anything. I've had my own bad review experience where someone who was co-producing a play with me and who was in the play invited a reviewer without me knowing to our opening night. And it was really more of a dress rehearsal than it was an opening night. Yeah, it did not go terribly well. The reviewer was very kind, but oi, it hurt. And so, like, yeah, that's out there somewhere. It is, and that's a fact. But the rest of that run, I loved. You know what I mean? And the people that came to the rest of the run were very they received the show quite well. And so it's no one's ever going to know the story of that day, that performance, that whatever that happened, and they're not going to see everything that went into it. They're left with one impression, and all that matters is that you show up the next day and you continue to do your job.
I mean, this is the thing. And first off, for theater, it's that play, that performance, that moment, it only exists right in that moment. And then tomorrow's another opportunity to go at it, you know? And that's one of the beautiful things about it, is that it's ephemeral. It lasts for one moment and then it's over.
And you learn from it is key.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
There was so much we learned from that night's performance, and not even from the review, but from that night's performance and then the review, that we carry forward into the work for the rest of the week, that made it all stronger. So as long as you can take from failure the stuff that bolsters you to success next time, you're doing it right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, you know, people can really get hung up on reviews, but it is only one person's opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a review written about my Fringe show that broke my heart for a moment, but ultimately the criticism was, this play didn't reflect my experience at theater school. And I was like, okay, well it's about my experience at theater school.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. So write your play about your experience at theater
I'd love
school.
to see it. I'd love to come and see it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I want to come back to your theater company, because the one thing I didn't get to is the name. Mm-hmm. Where does the name come from?
All right. So Fort Hart, you know, what's so funny is I packed up my life and moved back to St. John. And of course, we've been digging through boxes as we settle into our still in renovations house. And I came across a project I wrote for school when I was in theater school. And it was essentially the outline of Fort Hart Productions. And I found it scribbled on so many different pages from different classes. So the roots of it were somewhere before I even realized it. But Fort Hart is a bit of an homage to my hometown, which has many forts. We were the first incorporated city in Canada, I will have you know. And so we have Martello Tower, we have Fort Howe, we have Fort Latour. We have a strong history in the region. And it was a way of me celebrating that sort of part of my history. It's also my father's initials, FH. And so that was very important to me to put in there. He's the hugest supporter I've ever had. He took me to every play that was anywhere, and has flew out to Vancouver for my plays and for my graduation, and just what a wonderful man he is. And it's also something that spells out for the art. So that's a big part of why I want to do what I'm doing, is I really want to explore the boundaries of storytelling. I want to challenge audiences. I, of course, want to entertain people. I want to make people laugh. But I also want to make us all look in the mirror and look at what the world is going through.
Yeah. Yeah. With this move back to St. John and sort of like restarting Fort Hart here in St. John, you've been teaching. Now, were you teaching in Vancouver, or is this a new thing for you?
Yeah, no, I was teaching in Vancouver. I think I launched my workshops in Vancouver in 2018. And before that, I had been running an alumni group at the school I went to, which wasn't me formally teaching, but it was, I found that there was this need among a lot of my graduate friends who we got out of school and we went, yay, wait, what, where do I, and so I felt the need to want to like cleave onto others for that support in that community. And we built one, and that was an amazing thing. And we all kind of taught each other. It was very like neighborhood playhouse sort of thing. And then it kind of evolved into, once I created Port Hartney, eventually teaching. And I just love it. I love it so much. And so I knew when I moved here, there's not much arts education available. When there is, it's one-off workshops, which can be great, but it's not something that's going to build and sustain. And so something that I've always wanted to see happen in the Atlantic region, and particularly in New Brunswick, is a massive boost to our film and TV industry. And some of those opportunities are starting to come here. It's really exciting. But again, we're going to end up in this weird area where we're bringing in all of our talent. And I really want to see those opportunities created and given to people who are from here. The only way to do that is to make sure that we have a strongly trained workforce ready to go. And so a huge goal of mine is to be able to provide these opportunities to people, opportunities that weren't here when I was, growing up here, and to see them have the opportunity to get into a role on a film, get into a role on a TV show. Even if it's a day player role, from here, it's such a huge thing to put on your resume, and then to continue to build your resume throughout the Atlantic region, into the wider region of Canada, and who knows where after that.
Yeah, one of my big pet peeves as I see shows and movies that are filmed in Canada, is that fact that, like, sure, it was filmed here, not a single lead character is from here, for the most part. Like, occasionally there's somebody who manages to luck out and they have a role that like goes through the show or the film, but that's very rare. Usually they're bringing in all of the actors from the US, and then you get to be waiter number 2 or something like that. And I really feel like that's, first off, it does a disservice to the talent that we have here.
Huge.
But also, it also serves to perpetuate the feeling that a lot of Canadians have that our product is inferior to the American product. because, well, if it was any good, then our actors would be in the leads in this show, right?
Yeah. No, I
No.
I know so many incredibly talented people here. I know people who I would put up against any American actor.
Yeah.
And they're brilliant. They're so good. They're so good. And it's heartbreaking, to see them not get opportunities in their own country, because they are essentially Canadian. And so, I've had friends who have had really big, meaty roles on some really great projects. But the running joke in Vancouver really was that, if you turn on an episode of Supernatural, you're going to see three people who are crossing the street with you today.
Yeah.
Everybody was on Supernatural. It was kind of like, it was Vancouver's Law and Order. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's great that they're getting work, but that was everyone from like people who are very, very green to people who have been doing this 40, 50 years, without exaggeration, still booking the same caliber of roles simply because they're going to bring in most of the leads. Oh, you're muted again.
Thank you.
I got
there
you,
are
homie.
very few shows. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are very few shows that I can think of that were shot in Canada that had Canadians in the leads.
Yeah.
I could really only think of one, and that was Battlestar Galactica, which in its time had a bunch of Canadians in either lead roles or series regulars, which
Yeah.
again almost never happens. So it's always like once you found out, that I was always rooting for the Canadians on the show. Get more screen time, get more screen time. And it's so amazing when that happens, but again, so rare.
So rare. And I mean, it's absolutely the exception, not the rule. But I mean, you would think over this long a time span that would have shifted by now. And I think we're still very much in the infancy of that shift. With everything that's currently happening in the world, who knows what's around the corner? But I don't see it changing without us changing it. You know what I mean? I come back to that idea of like, let's make our own thing.
I think that's super important that the change will happen, but we have to make it. Like, there has to be an effort here in Canada. As you know, it's great that people are boycotting stuff from the US and they're trying to buy Canadian groceries and things like that. But like, there needs to be like the industry needs to start churning out great shit.
Yeah.
And putting it on TV in a way that puts it on the same footing as American stuff so that we can really show off.
Yeah. And we have a lot to show off.
Yeah.
But we need to create the same equal opportunities, at least for ourselves here. And I mean, that's part of a much larger conversation in around, distribution and marketing and just straight up money. Which is hard to come by in this industry anyway. Unless you've got a big name behind you. And even with those big names, they usually have to be an American name to bring that draw in,
Yeah.
And it is what it is to a certain extent, but it'll be that way until somebody takes the torch and changes it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this applies to film, television, and theater. Like, people will like line up to see the latest musical coming in from the States at one of the big theaters. But we have stuff that is as good or better in some of our smaller theaters. So like, this is something that we have to learn how to talk about it in a way that gets people to come out. And I think we're really bad at talking about.
Oh, we suck at talking about it. Oh, we're so terrible at talking about it. And in the Atlantic region, I think something I've been struggling with is that I think we are the most polite people on the planet. But it comes at the cost of honest criticism sometimes. And so we kind of miss the opportunity to level up sometimes, And I was saying to a few of my students the other day, we were talking about it. They were asking me what one of the biggest differences is from Vancouver to St. John. And I said, there's such a spirit of collaboration out west. It's really like you can't you can't go for a coffee without running into somebody who says, "Hey, did you want to collaborate on like a play, or did you want to put something up? Do you have something going on that I can promote?" Like, it's everybody's all in on like, let's do the thing, and it's a very collective experience. And here I have just not found that same sense. We're a hugely community oriented region, which is a wonderful thing. But it seems really hard to find people who want to take the thing and run with it. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
try
I
new
think
things.
well, yeah. I mean, I think that it is easier to be in a pond with a lot of fish than where everybody is like just sort of running around doing stuff. That you work together more in a pond with very few fish. It can be more about I have my piece of the pie, and you'll come to me if you want to take a bite. It can be really difficult because somebody maybe fought really hard to get where they are, and other people, because there isn't that whole like, oh, there's always people doing stuff and making stuff. It can be a little bit harder in a place with a smaller pool.
Yeah. And I think what I want to, shift in that narrative is that all art is collaboration at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Me creating something makes your creations awesomer.
Yeah.
You creating something makes my creations awesomer. It's
Yeah.
just about that sense of like, all art should be fuel for other art. And, I have no one that I wouldn't want to like get together and throw something at the wall with. If you're creative and I'm a creative, then let's create. And I think that that's really what it comes down to for me is like, I just want to play, man. I want to tell the stories. I want to do the exercises. I want to find new ways of working that like really light something up. And why
Yeah.
not try? Why not try?
I mean, theater is not, it cannot be created in a vacuum.
No.
It is a collaboration. The only place it might not be a collaboration is when the author is writing the first draft. And after that, it's always going to be some form of collaboration, and more people come into it all the time.
Yes.
Even a performance of a solo show even is a collaboration with an audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you don't have that, like, what are you doing?
I mean, I've seen a show before where it was a solo show where the performer clearly did not need or care if the audience was there. And it showed in that the audience was like, why am I here? And, but like, until you realize that like, you're collaborating with everybody, from the director to the producer to the costume designer to the set designer to the stage man. Like everybody who comes into contact with this play is one of your collaborators. Yeah. And at that point, so many magical things can happen.
Oh my God, yes. All you have to do is allow it. It's really, your example makes me think that, whoever this person was doing this solo show where the audience didn't matter, might as well have put a mirror out there for them to work off of. Because if you're not taking in the energy of the audience at the very least, whether it's an interactive show or not, if you're not letting that at least affect you, then you're not performing authentically to what's happening in the room you're in.
Yeah.
And then what are you doing but, gesticulating?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have had, years ago, I worked at one of the big theaters here. This is a long time ago. Les Mis was playing in Toronto. It tells you about how long ago that was. And I was working at the theater, and one of the actor who was playing Thénardier was a genius. Sometimes a joke won't land, sometimes a joke won't land. And maybe it's because it's a Friday night audience or a Wednesday night audience or whatever it is. They're tired. The audience is not feeling it. It's snowing. It's raining, whatever it is. And they just don't feel it.
Yeah.
He was a master of knowing. He could feel what the audience needed at the moment. And he would like deliver the line or whatever it was in a way that suddenly they were like alive.
Yeah.
And when you have a sense of the audience, when you feel the audience, you can do that.
Yeah. And you have to be in theater, you have to be acutely aware of it. It's a whole nother beast in film and television. It's still very relevant, but in a nuanced way. And so I feel like with theater, to develop that sensibility, to really have you have to sensationally be able to experience what the audience is going through with you. And if you've got them and if you don't. And if you don't, you have to make the fight, you know? And the fight is just to be present. It's not, I've seen, performances where it's one thing when someone's trying to go for it, to like bait the line and like reel them in. And it's very different when you're just present and authentic. And that's what they need.
It's nothing. There's nothing worse than watching a show where the audience is not there and the actors go, oh, well, nothing we can do. And they kind of throw in the towel and they're just marking time to the end of the show.
Yeah.
And I think we've all seen that, but it's like the audience paid money. They came there to be entertained.
Oh, absolutely. I think you have a responsibility. You've created the poster, you've promoted the show, you've invited them in, you've taken their money, you've sat them down and, often too warm or too cold for the space in the dark. And at that point, it is your responsibility to crack your heart open, let these people in, and challenge them to experience something with you. Whether it's a comedy or drama, you have to be taking them on that ride with you.
Yeah.
And if you're not earnestly willing to collaborate with everybody in that space, your fellow actors, everyone on the stage crew, the tech crew, and the audience, then you're not doing the thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just as we're starting to reach the end of our time together, I wanted to ask a little bit about St. John as a theater town. Now, I know there's a St. John Theater Company, and St. John Theater Company does the Fundy Fringe, or there's a partnership there. But, of course, I'm in Toronto, and I've only seen St. John during the Fringe. So as somebody from St. John who's living in St. John, can you tell me a little bit about the theater scene in St. John?
Actually, I was just going to ask you if I could give a massive shout out. So there is another theater company that has started up here, and they do musical theater. They just wrapped their second production, and it was stellar. Spark Call Productions, and they're really committed local artists. Excellent production value. They did Firebringer last year, and they did Rent this year. And both productions just blew me away. Nothing like anything I've seen in St. John my entire life. And so I just wanted to give a huge congratulations to them on their run. Wow, what a job well done. And it's exciting to see more and more things like that coming to the region. So they've started up, and Fort Hart, we have our showcase coming up in about a month's time. So we're really excited about that. That'll be our first little foray onto the stage. And then hopefully we'll be launching a full season for next year.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Now for you, what does a full season look like? How many shows is a full season? Can you...
So what my hopes and dreams would be for 2026 would be that as the year comes on, we'll have a first production sort of in the spring. Through the summer, I'd love to bring back in Vancouver. I did something called the Summer Shorties, which was usually anthology pieces that we would launch and have, two-hander, three-hander plays that are really the length of scenes, and just an awesome opportunity to get a lot of artists involved collaborating. and on stage and telling stories, and then roll into the fall with another piece. If I can get more done than that, I would love to do a few monologue competitions, community events, things to really bring people in and make sure that we're bolstering the scene locally.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's
Thanks.
awesome. Now, Mariel, I'm going to link all of your social media for the casting and your theater company and all that sort of stuff. But where can people find you online?
Little old me. So on Instagram, I am unknown Mariel. And on Facebook, I am Mariel Kathryn Hunter. I think those are my only socials currently.
Well, Mariel, it is so good to sit down and chat with you. I really appreciate you making the time for me. And yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for sharing an hour with me.
Oh, I'm so glad we were able to do it. I've missed you, and it's just always such a joy to speak with you, and to talk theater with you is so rewarding.
Thanks, Mariel.
Thanks, Phil.